Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Series 6 of Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours aims to record 1,000 loiners, that's people from Leeds, over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and tell me about what they do and let me record how this decade affects us. These are long-form interviews meant to challenge the short attention span content economy. That means they aren't always easy listening, but in my view, they are all worth listening to. They all tell us something about our guest, our city, and our time, not to mention something of what it's like to do that job and how someone got into that job. You're helping this project right now by being a listener, and I'd love for you to consider becoming a guest or a supporter of this project. Thank you for listening to this episode. What did you want to be when you grew up?
So it's an interesting one, this, for me, because I had a real passion as a teenager for aircraft. And I just wanted to be a pilot. I always wanted to be a pilot. And I will never forget the day when my hopes were dashed when I went to a career fair at my high school, and I walked into the hall and there was the RAF. And I thought, fantastic, I'm going to go and have a chat with them. And I did, and I sat down and we had a really good chat. I got their brochure, I took it home, and then I started to read it, and I was starting to read the back page towards the end, and all the list of reasons why you can't be a pilot, to discover that colour blindness is something that stops it used to stop you from being a pilot. They wouldn't accept you on the programme. So in a heartbeat, my whole kind of A-level choices and my sort of future dream was taken away, really. I then went down the air traffic controller route. I thought, well, if I can't be in a plane, I want to be around planes.
Yeah.
But sadly, it was not to be.
So how long did you just look at sort of air traffic control and then you were like, I don't really want to do that? Or did you start working in it and then you were...
No, I did some research again and had a little look. Obviously, it wasn't online because you couldn't go online in those days and get that kind of detail. But I looked into it as well. And unfortunately, the same issue cropped up. And so I very quickly realised that was not going to be a possibility either. And so actually, at that point, I thought, what am I going to do? I didn't really know what was going to come next. And this was going into GCSEs and then A-level choices, really. So it was all a bit of a, okay, well, where do I go from here?
Before I move us on, so in case it doesn't come up again, I just want to ask, has your colour blindness affected your work in any other way? Has it been a limitation in any other part of your career? Or
so it's really interesting because it's quite a risk putting something like that out there from a professional perspective. I ended up being in a buying role for a footwear and clothing company, and one of the and it was a sports footwear role that my first sort of assistant buying role, actually, and obviously colour was really important. So, we'd go and see Nike and Reebok, and they'd show us their standard white trainer with multiple colour options, etc. And I'd be like, okay, well, I can see that's yellow and that's blue and that's, and I suppose I hid it at the time because I didn't want to show vulnerability. It never hampered me in a professional sense because I had strategies and found ways to navigate around it. Plus, it's also written down on the piece of paper with the shoe that you actually have in front of you. So I could go, oh, right, well, there's the shoe and there's the colour. Right, okay, that's the navy and ecru one. So I suppose it's a disability, but no, you find ways to get around these things. So I'd never really had a major issue. And I ended up being quite honest about it as I got a little bit older, because there's nothing wrong with being colourblind at all.
No.
You just use the people around you to help you make the decisions.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things, isn't it? We're all different.
Absolutely. I wear glasses. Do you know what I mean? Nobody bats an eyelid at that. Pardon the pun. So yeah, it's just another one of those things.
You're listening to Series 6, Episode 5, and to my guest, Simon Williams. This is another Squadcast recorded on the 29th of January, 2025. Hello, listener. Simon Williams is the owner and director of SW Retail Consultancy Ltd. SW Retail Consultancy Ltd deliver to their clients big ideas and simple solutions. Simon works closely with business owners who want to deep dive into their organisation and understand their opportunities for growth and savings. Data is the key to unlocking the potential of every organisation, and this is where SW Retail Consultancy start, analysing the sales in, structuring it into a simple, easy to understand format, and then shining a light on performance highs and lows. Their raison d'etre, thanks for getting me to pronounce French, Simon, is to help with small/medium-sized businesses who have one eye on costs, but are keen to invest in external expertise. Simon takes his experience with companies like Asda and Morrison's and miniaturizes it for SMEs. SW Retail Consultancy Ltd also works with suppliers, either already in or looking to get into the retail sector, and also carry out project work for larger organizations. It's another banger, this one. Right, let's do this. Episode 160 of Working Hours with Simon Williams. Let's start with what you're doing now, then.
Okay.
So what is it that you do now? And then the next question is the sort of how you got into it.
So for the last 10 years, and actually this is my 10th year that I've just entered, I've set up a retail consultancy business. I'm a one-man band, but my whole approach and what I do is working with small, medium businesses to try and take what I've learnt throughout my previous career in other businesses and miniaturize it for business owners who maybe haven't got enough money to spend tens of thousands of pounds on IT systems or expensive consultants to come in and help them try and build a strategy for their business. But because of what I've done historically, I also work with suppliers into retailers as well. So I do a bit of account management. I open a pop-up shop every year as well. So that's quite an interesting experience and very useful, actually, when talking to clients. But really, it's a case of I'm a data analyst. That's kind of what I am. My career history has always been looking at numbers, understanding numbers, and then interpreting them so that you can use them to build a strategy for growth within the category that I may have been responsible for at the time. The principle is no different. So really, I take a microscope and I look at the detail of what's going on in organizations, because business owners rarely get time to do that, and try and help them to see where the opportunities are, shine a light on what's going on in their organization. The amount of times I've sat talking to businesses and thrown their numbers back at them and they've gone, goodness me, I never knew that. And it's quite astounding, actually, in a way. But in another way, it's really comforting to know that it's an important part of what all businesses should be doing, and that it's an opportunity for me to continue doing what I do, really.
I mean, it's, because you're working with data, you've got some, because a lot of management consultants or, trainers, people coming into the business, advisors and so on, they'll talk about lots of different theories and schools of thoughts and various flowcharts and systems and processes where you're looking at what do you know, what's happened.
Facts and evidence.
Yeah, and you're working immediately with something that's immediately relatable. It's just you're translating it into something that's useful for people of like, look at this and look at it this way and like see what you can see what's already there that's obvious. I can bring that out for you.
100%. And actually what's fascinating is I've worked with a number of businesses, big businesses over the years, and they all have sophisticated IT systems and data management systems, and they can churn out information at the drop of a hat. You can inquire against their databases and get any number of different routes to looking at the same statistics. But the fact is, 80% of all the answers I have found are always in front of you. So as a buyer, and I've been a buyer for most of my career, or as a merchandiser who works with buyers, if you look at the numbers, look at the information that you have at your fingertips to start with, then that will help inform your decision-making process and make the majority of the decisions for you. It will actually, we talk about a Pareto curve. It's the 80-20 rule. If 80% of the sales usually come from 20% of the products. Well, it kind of works like that. So if you spend more time on 20% of the products to deliver 80%, then you've almost done your job. And then the rest of your time is about, okay, how much risk would I like to take? Where's the market going? Where do I want to invest my time and opportunity? What do I stop doing? Because it's not working anymore. And it's just facts. It's all facts. And I think in the last role I had before I went solo, I was able to amalgamate the buying role and the numbers role together because I'd got to a point in my career where I thought, well, I've worked with so many buyers over the years and they all think they know best. And some of them do, but, and I'll be perfectly honest, you're dealing with egos. And they're also influenced by the marketplace and what other suppliers are putting in front of them. But rarely do they properly look at the numbers and let that dictate the decision-making process. And I thought, it's my turn to do this. I'm going to prove that this works. And I remember going to Morrison's as a buyer, and I remember working for a very experienced and entrepreneurial MD who basically said to me, right, Simon, don't think that you can come in here as a buyer and start demanding lots of merchandisers to help you work the numbers through. You're the merchandiser as well. Just get on with it and do it. And you know what? I did, and we did, and it was exciting. It was different. But yeah, data is absolutely the key to unlocking the potential for any organisation. It doesn't matter whether it's a retailer. If you're selling something, a service, if you're an accountant or a solicitor even, and you have a particular strength because you invoice people for a particular, maybe accountancy firm specialises in car manufacturers or plumbers or whatever it is, you can get that from the data. And if you're looking at the data, you can start to decide, oh, well, actually, if we're experts in this and 40% of our organisation is invoicing these kinds of businesses, then let's shout about that. Let's use our social media better now and start telling everybody that we're experts in this particular field and try and generate new business that way. So it's fast. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I mean, do you find, what are the difficulties? Do you need a business to get to a certain size or to be around long enough? Like, when do you have enough data to actually work with? Can you start from zero with a client and be like, right, well, I guess you would start at the very minimum with like a business plan.
Yeah.
If you were going to go that far back. But I would imagine most of your customers are people who are already in business, they've been going for a while, and they have something that you can already work with. But is there like a minimum that you need for that?
So I would say that retail is a cycle, and it's a very, very clear cycle. And it starts at the beginning of the year and it ends at the end of the year. And that gives you a really good historical kind of example of what happens with your products and your business through all the seasons, all the key events that happen through the year. And that's enough information to start really kind of flagging where there are strengths and where there are weaknesses. I would say the more data there is, the more focused your outputs can be, because you can look at trends over a longer period of time. And it does vary from business to business. So I think every time I changed role and went into a new buying department, the first thing I would do was have a look at the sales history, particularly for the year just gone or the current trends. Then I might go back and have a look at headline information from a year or two before, just to see if what was happening locally and recently was something that had a life cycle and was coming to the end of it, or was just starting to see a growth phase that you wanted to invest further in. So, I did a piece of work for an online business about 4 years ago, relatively immature, and they had about 2.5 years worth of data, but it was really the previous year where there was any kind of volume to be viewed, and insights to be given. So for young companies, it's important to look at what they're doing right now. I think for established organizations and businesses, supermarkets that I've worked with in the past, it's important to understand the journey on a longer period, over a longer period of time. But, buying and retail categories vary. Some are really current, the whole fidget spinner effect, it comes and goes in a heartbeat, whereas everybody always needs a £5 plastic kettle, so to speak. So it's understanding that kind of relationship and the balance, and, get your core right, and understand what your core customer wants, and then you can just let that run, and then you can focus on building up the rest of your business on the foundation that you've set as well. So, yeah, it depends, but at least a year minimum.
Yeah. So in terms of your kind of work day and how you're working and where you're kind of spending the majority of your time, are you home-based? Are you out? Like, I would imagine you do face-to-face meetings with clients, and you spend a lot of time actually, unpacking everything and talking to them and imbibing all the information of their business and what they're about. Yeah. So is that a good mix of stuff, or are you mostly sort of just deep in the data, just reams and reams of stuff, and then you occasionally come out and go, here's what I found?
Well, do you know what? Sometimes there are days where I do feel like I've gone down the rabbit hole and I've come out, and the suddenly of the bright lights and everything. It can be a bit like that. But no, it does vary. It varies from client to client. I think I will always want to have some sort of face-to-face with any potential client. I think that's really important. At the moment, that could be a Teams meet or an actual face-to-face. I will always work from home when it comes to data analysis. I feel like it's more comfortable for me to be in my own space. I don't mind going into other organisations if that's what they want me to do, and if they feel that they need to see me doing what I'm doing. But ultimately, that comes down to a trust thing. I think a lot of the organisations that I've worked for are usually based on recommendation or from people who I've worked with in the past. So there's already that trust. But I would say 75% of my time is home-based. I think with any retained clients, I'll see them on a more regular basis, and we'll get together and work face to face. But a lot of what I do is home based. Yeah.
So I mean, we'll probably touch more on that when we get into COVID and so on.
Yes.
So I want to go on to how you got into it. But yeah, I want to start with, since you mentioned the A-levels, I'll also tell the recording that we've got an additional guest in the in the podcast.
Thank you.
So did you do A-levels university? Did you go straight into a job or an apprenticeship? What was your kind of route into that into that position?
So I'd like to say it was traditional. It was far from traditional, albeit I did A-levels and I got awful grades. But it was a time when they were encouraging people to go to university. It was, 1990. So,
did you choose the wrong subjects? Was that the thing? Or
no,
were you
if
just
I'm really
kind of
honest, after my GCSEs, I hated A-levels. There was
Yeah.
no inspiration for me in the subjects that I chose.
Yeah.
I didn't choose the wrong subjects. I chose the ones that were probably the ones I had a closer affinity to. But I don't know, school and I'd love to go back and do it again. But it's
too
easy
long.
to say that.
It's like a whole decade, and you're only tiny, and it's like, I've been here forever. I want to see the world. There's stuff out there. This is boring.
But then, I was kind of, we got paid to go to university, basically. Our fees were paid, and because from a family perspective, we fell into the bracket of me getting a bit of a grant. I had extra money in my pocket, so and I left home and I went up to Newcastle University to do what was ultimately an HND in marketing and languages. Did I want to do marketing and languages? Well, maybe the marketing, but not the languages. It was 27 hours of lectures a week, which was like being at school again. It was in a great city that I knew really, really well. And so I just had a good time for a year. I did.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do.
Well, exactly. I had a really good time. I enjoyed it. But then I came back to Leeds, which is where I lived, and went to Leeds Met and did a health studies degree, which it was really general. It was bizarre. But what it did have in it, and the good stuff that it did have in it, was psychology and management psychology and people-related subjects. Let's just sort of put it that way. And I think that's where I discovered that actually I quite like people, and I like studying people, and I like kind of assessing and understanding people. And I'm terrible now, but I think then I was quite a good listener.
Yeah.
Don't ask my wife that question. But I think those aspects of the degree were what really helped me get through it, albeit I did still fail my second year and have to retake it. And so eventually I got a degree after 5 years, basically. But then getting into the work environment, so I worked part-time at Tesco on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that whole retail vibe and the surrounded by people all the time, chatting with people, customers, getting to know them. But I also loved the whole structured approach of, so I worked in the fruit and veg section, and it was all really structured. So apples went there, oranges went there, cauliflowers went there. It was never any different. So your job was to make sure that all the stock that had been delivered on these wagons was in the spaces and it was full constantly. So it was like, it really played to my obsession with order and structure. Although I didn't know that at the time. And I'm not going to label it because that's just the kind of person that I am. But I loved it. And then I got given more responsibility within that same time frame, which was, on a Saturday when the boss goes at 4:00 and you're in charge of making sure that it's ready for Sunday. And I just really enjoyed the responsibility. And I did that for about 3 years. I then, during that period, also set up it's a bit of a left field thing, but set up a youth club, summer club with my wife, who was a youth leader in the community. Worked with her during the summer. And the sponsors of that summer club was a chap who was a business owner. And I happened to be at a meeting where there were other people present, and we were talking about this summer club and stuff like that. And this guy came in, and he sat down right beside me, and he went, "Are you Simon?" I went, "Yeah." And he said, "Simon, I want you to come and work for me." And I went,
"What?"
Yes, that's it. In my head, I went, "What? who are you? Why are you asking me this question? Anyway, obviously being from an acting background, I showed no emotion and looked at him and said, well, okay, interesting proposition. Who are you? And tell me what your business is anyway. He told me. He said, come and see me. Are you free on Monday? I said, yes. I said, okay. So I went to Appley Bridge, Bradford, where Stylo was based, their head office. So they
ring a bell.
A footwear company.
Yeah.
They were Barrett's shoes and ultimately Priceless shoes, Shelley's shoes, Stylo Instep Sports. They were Stylo matchmakers, and they were a high street, mainstream retailer.
Yeah.
And I remember going into the office, meeting the boss, the CEO, who gave me the tour, took me up to the boardroom afterwards, sat down and said to me, he said, you might be sitting in here one day, young man. And I said, right, okay. He said, and I'd like to offer you a job. Now, at that time, it was a real there was a fashion for graduate management trainee schemes. So my interest in Tesco was very much down that route. And I had just started to look at graduate management trainee schemes within retail. I thought, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going to go. But I'd also just got married. And I knew that Sainsbury's and Tesco and their programs took you all around the country, and you could be literally
and took years
anywhere for however long exactly.
Yeah,
and I just thought, this isn't. I'll go for it, but I'm not comfortable with what might come. Anyway, this opportunity, sitting in a room, I want to bring a couple of graduate management trainees in. Would you be interested? And I went, actually, yes, I would be interested. I thought, fantastic, this is amazing. He says, okay, well, look, let me put an offer in the post to you, and let's see if we can come to an agreement. So I remember getting this letter, and in the letter, it offered me a salary of £10,000 a year. Okay, so this was 1995. Okay. So for anybody listening that's any younger than certainly me, they'll probably think, 10 grand, that's not a lot of money. It was okay. It was a decent salary.
Yeah.
However, Tesco and Sainsbury's were offering 15 grand for all their graduate management trainee schemes. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So there was my first negotiation ever.
I was going to say, did you just say that, well, they're offering this, and they went, we'll have it.
So it was really, how this worked is really bizarre, and it was really odd, but the business owner happened to know my mother-in-law very well. My mother-in-law got a message from him, I didn't, to say, I've sent Simon a letter, tell me tell him to give me a call on what he thinks about it, and we'll have a chat. And so I got the message, and I remember sleeping on it overnight, talking to Louise, thinking, right, okay, what do we do? And I'm like, I know exactly what to do here. And I rang him up and I said, look, it's a really kind offer. This is exactly what I want to do. However, if I was going to be doing this in a Tesco or a Sainsbury's, etc., the going rate is 15 grand. So, is there any way we can, come to some sort of arrangement? Anyway, 48 hours later, a new letter came, and I got the single biggest pay rise I've ever had in my life. So we agreed to 15 grand, and that's when my journey in retail properly started.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's that, I use the phrase, the sort of art of the possible, but you kind of have to see the possibilities happen, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you can, these things happen, but not until they really happen, and then you're like, oh, yeah, it can happen.
I think as you get older, if you look back and do what, sensible people do, and you ask the question why, why, how and why did that happen? How did that come about? What was it that got me to that point? I think most people would, if they're really honest with themselves, realize that one, it's down to themselves, first of all, because, you don't notice, we don't see ghosts, do we? You don't see ghosts at all, but you do see people standing there with a massive flag that's bright yellow, waving it in the middle of a crowd of people who aren't waving flags. So, you're it's down to you, but it's also down to just the circumstances that you might find yourself in and the people that you happen to know as well. And I don't think I understood the value and meaning of that until 10 years ago. And realised that from 1995 through to, where are we now, 2025, so 2015, so 30 years, 20 years, yeah. All that time that had passed and everything that I'd learned and picked up was really, really valuable, incredibly valuable.
Well, yeah, you've no idea. It's the whole, because I worked in the whole sort of learning and skills environment, and the whole sort of discussion around transferable skills and stuff. And it's I don't have any transferable skills, because that's how you think. Because you work in, you've got one worker mindset on, and your head's sort of positioned in this way.
Yeah.
And someone has to kind of take you through it and go, well, you've got this, and that's useful. And companies like that, don't they?
Yeah.
And that's really useful to somebody. And then when you start seeing them in that different, again, it's data. It's looking back at the data and going, like, oh yeah, it's all there. It's all laid out for me in front of me. I just have to know how to read it and look at it and use it. Yeah.
Completely, because most of what we've done in our lives, particularly when you talk about your career, is literally repeating the same behaviour over and over again. It's funny. I always there are people who are comfortable in the same job, day in, day out, year in, year out, because they know exactly where they are and where they stand, what's coming in at the end of the month, what they're doing on a daily basis, and the structure of their life feels comfortable. And then, I suppose when I started to work for businesses like Morrison's and Asda, they start to push you outside that comfort zone and say, okay, it's like you mentioned it before, it's the art of the possible or the impossible. Well, what else can you do with the skill set you have to stretch that comfort zone? And actually, it's stepping outside it is really, really nerve-wracking. But I always say it's a bit of a horseshoe effect. When you really fear something that you're about to do, you're also a little bit excited. It's the same emotion. And so if you can kind of change your mindset and think, all right, well, look, I am a bit scared, but I'm really excited to do this. And you can just take that slightly more positive approach, then one, it comes across better. Two, you feel better about it. And three, when you've done it, you feel amazing. It's a fantastic thing. It's like being an actor on a stage. You wonder why they continually do this day in, day out. And they do it because it's a buzz. Yeah. And that's what you get from sometimes just pushing yourself a little bit and stepping outside that comfort zone. It's nice to stay nice and warm and cozy sometimes, though, as well.
Yeah, well, and it's times in your life as well, isn't it? Because nothing, it's not a straight line. It's never a straight line just up. Doesn't matter what the graph says or who's drawn the line. But it's that. So there are points in your life where you're like, yes, I will grasp every opportunity with both hands, and points where you're like, I am not taking any risks whatsoever in any direction right now.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's a confidence thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, I think one of the great things about having my own business, having worked in various organisations for many years, is it's the assessing what makes you tick and what pushes you. And I think I got to a point where, yes, an opportunity arose, that the stars aligned for it to come to fruition. But I think work is all about people, and you respond differently to different people. And so working for someone can be a good experience or it's not a good experience. But that's very much dependent upon the relationship you have with those people. When you're on your own, your motivation is your own motivation. So for me, it was the realization that, all right, good people can motivate me, bad people can demotivate me. But when it's mine, I don't feel the pressure of being motivated because it's mine. And I want to do this because I chose it. And therefore, I don't need anybody to tell me to do it this way or that way. I'll just learn as I go along. And yes, I've got all this experience, so that'll help. But, you know what, I might make a mistake, I might say the wrong thing, I might get it wrong sometimes, but I'm old enough, big enough and experienced enough now to A, take it on the chin, and B, trust my own kind of experience and knowledge and judgment. And it's quite,
and there is
it's quite nice to know that sometimes you are right after the event.
Yeah. I was going to say on that of, you were saying you've got all that, the history, the background, the previous experience, and talking about the nerves of being in the moment. There is that, it's all there, and it's the sort of thing like they say in yoga, if you've got everything you need, but it's also not there as well, because you're not in any of those moments, you're now in this moment. So all of that helps. It really helps, and it's good to fall back on, but you can't rely on it either. It's because you've got to deal with what's in front of you too. Does that make sense?
It does make
being
sense.
Too airy with that.
And actually, within retail, it moves so fast. I mean, it literally can sometimes change hour to hour. And so you have to be able to adapt really, really quickly. So the experience helps you to do that and makes you bold enough to make decisions with the information that you might have. But sometimes you just got to be brave and take a bit of a punt. And it's a scientific experiment. So at the moment, my son is learning about chemistry and physics and biology and all the different ways in which you can, manipulate chemicals to get different reactions. And it really made me think, well, actually, isn't that what we're doing, or what I'm doing, or what we're all doing all the time, which is, cause and effect. I'm going to do this. The result will be whatever it will be. If it's favourable, I'll keep doing it. If it's not, I'm just going to stop doing it. So if you apply that principle to information that you get from your business, whatever the business is, there will be stuff that you keep doing because it works, and there's stuff that you stop doing. But what you've got to do is give yourself the time to see that as well, because otherwise you will constantly be living on your toes, and the pressure and the intensity of that sometimes can be very overwhelming, and you make bad decisions. But yeah, retail is just an experiment every single day, and you respond to that experiment and the information that gets thrown out from it.
Yeah. And you've got to, at that point, you're in a position where you have to trust the data, because you can't have oversight. I mean, especially if you're working at a national level. I mean, obviously you're not, I don't know how it would be managed, but I can't imagine you'd have direct oversight over every line in the, because there's hundreds of thousands.
Yep.
But I guess you're looking at specific areas at specific times. But even then, you can't get that whole overview of a, somewhere, a territory this big. So you're looking at snapshots of it, and you have to rely on the data to be like, okay, well, we know some of it might not always be in the best state that we want it to be in, but this is our best guide for this.
Correct.
And you've got different quality levels of your data as well, haven't you?
You do, and you have to assess that and make sure that you've got a point of reference where you can say, well, this tells me that the total number is X, and this other reference point tells me that it's the same, so I can guarantee you that the information I'm providing you with is accurate. I think for me, I've worked in departments that are worth 5 million, 25 million, 125 million. As a buyer, you never really think of the number, because if you thought about the numbers, you'd get pretty scared, I think. And it's a big responsibility. However, for me, so it's corny. My strapline is really very specific. It's big ideas, simple solutions, okay? And the way I break it down is this. Everything is a pyramid. Okay, so let's take the whole of the Asda business, okay? And let's say that we are responsible for the whole of the Asda business. Well, there's a big number at the top, okay? And it's massive. It's billions of pounds, okay? And it's quite scary, because you think, God, how do we manage that big number? But then you go down a level, and that big number gets split into this division and this division and this division. So it's smaller numbers, and suddenly it's like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable about it, but still it's a big number. So you go down another level, and you go, right, okay, so now I'm into the departments. I'm into meat and butchery. I'm into home and leisure. I'm into those subsections. And then you keep going and you keep going. And eventually you get to the actual product. Okay. And that's right at the bottom. But it's all those products that when you add them up, just make the big number. So if you take the principle of a triangle, and this is exactly what I do, is start at the top with the big number, break it down into smaller chunks. It's the old elephant. But then when you get to the bottom and you start to see how that big number is made up, you can build it back up again and create something that is even better. It becomes a better pyramid because you can pull out all the bricks that are broken and, the mortar that's all coming away, and then you can put stuff in that's going to make it stronger. And so that's the principle. And I always talk about the triangle. I always draw the triangle. It's like, I remember at university, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And that was the triangle. And I've kind of stolen it from there. And it sounds really obvious, but it's so simple when you start to break it down. You feel more comfortable about what you're looking at. And actually the evidence is there again. And I go back to the same thing, which is all the answers are in front of you, always.
Well, loads of the, same with the pyramid there. And I was talking earlier about the various, you've got all those business tools and stuff, but simple things like the 4-quadrant thing that you see everywhere now and in memes and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, that'd be really useful with your schoolwork and your planning. And it's like, why aren't we teaching them Gantt charts in secondary school? Like, why do you have to wait until you get into business for that?
I think it's funny because I talk to friends of mine who are avid business book readers. Okay. Yes, they've done some of the psychology and the management and business psychology stuff at university, etc. And I remember elements of it, but really now it's just the practical stuff that I've taken without talking theory or actual individuals who did it. And the very first business-related book I ever read was Dale Carnegie's How to Influence People, How to
Win Friends and Influence People.
Thank you. And actually, I was inspired by that because it really felt like it was me in that book, and that was how I did things. And it gave me confidence and assured me that actually what I was doing was a sensible, good practice approach. But it was also relatively honest, trustworthy, and came from a good place. And that's what, the morality of business for me, that book said, yeah, you know what? It's okay to do it this way because you can get to the same result. You hear about people who are, really successful, but they're tyrants to work for, etc. And of course they're going to do really, really well because they're relentless and they just push the whole time. But I've never believed that philosophy works for everybody, and you have to have a mix of approaches. So every time I've come across another book, or somebody said, oh, read this or read that, I've read one or two, but they're all just regurgitating the same sorts of messages. Or it's somebody who has lived and breathed it and is regurgitating their story in the context of that message and approach.
Or they're pitching to that market. They're saying the same stuff because they know that it sells.
Completely. And so, yes, of course I'm cynical. But I also believe that actually it doesn't... Everybody's saying the same thing, okay? And yes, as we all get older, we like to try and discover a little bit more about ourselves, what makes us tick, how we, what turns us on and turns us off, what inspires us, what demotivates us. But I go back to the data thing. If you have the strength to look in the mirror and be honest and assess what you do, and believe you me, I don't do this all the time, and then change your behavior as a result of an assessment of yourself, then you don't need a book to tell you to do that. So, yeah, I don't read these books anymore because I just feel like I'm reading somebody else's. It's like plagiarism.
Yeah. Have you been tempted to write one?
No. No, because actually it would be very self-serving.
Yeah.
And when I left Morrison's to set up my own business, I said that I wanted to take all the stuff I'd learned in Morrison's and Asda and Stylo and all the other big organisations I've worked with and miniaturize it for the small guy or the small business, because you don't need to spend tens of thousands of pounds on sophisticated IT systems. And here we are in a world of AI, and we can come on to that in a minute, but you don't need to bring McKinsey's in at £1,500 a day per person, etc., to tell your business or work out how your business needs to pivot or whatever. Actually, you just need someone who can look at the information in a really simplistic way, present it and talk about it in a simplistic way, and then help you to navigate the changes that are required in order to start delivering opportunity and growth. And again, that sounds really simplistic, but that's all I've done every single time I've worked for a different business or on a different category. The whole AI question, people have said to me, isn't what you do something that could just be done by artificial intelligence and stuff? And I'm like, do you know what? I could go on to ChatGPT and I could subscribe to it and I could teach it how to do the actual data analysis that I do. Okay. And I bet you I could get it to churn out the information quicker than I can do it. But it's missing one really, really vital thing. And that is the person looking at it every single week. Because you don't really know the story or the journey or the history unless you do it every week. You don't get under the skin of your organization. You don't watch the ebb and flow of products in and out and all the pricing changes and the impact of that, or what's happening from a competition point of view. You see none of that when a computer is doing all that churning for you. So for me, I've just used the same tools for 25 years nearly.
If it works, it works.
But that's the point. And so whilst I'm AI and all of that is my son's world, that's his future, or it's his present, I feel a bit more like a dinosaur now than I did before, but I stand by my principles because it works. And because it's because I believe in it.
It's that sort of, there's a level at which the best piece of technology you can own is a pen and a piece of paper.
It is.
So it doesn't run out of battery.
No, indeed. So, yes.
So we'll go into the questions, the sort of changey effects questions.
Sure.
So we'll start with lockdown. So it's a big period of time. There's a lot of things involved in it. What I mostly want to look at, feel free to discuss any parts of it, but what I mostly want to look at is your experience going into lockdown. What were the kind of changes that occurred for you, if anything, there? Yeah. And then coming out, was there anything permanent that changed for you?
So I suppose the things that changed for me that I would imagine were the same for the majority of people were the kind of, the fact that you weren't in an office or in a location elsewhere anymore. You were confined to your own space, but you were also surrounded by the people who are most important to you. And therefore, priorities were challenging. If you had children, then, we've got one, then they're sat doing schoolwork. If you're both working, then how do you manage that? And you're available 24/7. So there was the practical side of it. But I think for me, from a business perspective, I was a bit nervous about it in one sense, because, so I mentioned before that I do this pop-up shop every year, and it just so happened that the shop was due to open about 2 weeks after we went into that first lockdown period. And I'll never forget sitting in a meeting when I was told that the building that we were due to have the shop in was likely to be closed. and therefore nobody could come in and everything. And we were literally, oh my goodness, we've got all this stock coming in. We've got a lot of it laid out, and we've got a lot more work to do, and people can't come in and buy it. That's a big problem. How are we going to manage it? We did, because we pivoted from a standard retail business to basically a click and collect, order delivery service. That's a different podcast, that whole sort of subject. However, it made me realise, oh, hang on a minute, if retailers in the main are unable to open their doors and they're pivoting to online, for example, how does my sort of business opportunity fit into that? At the time, I was lucky because I had a couple of retained clients that supplied into retailers, so that didn't stop. And there were one or two organisations who got in touch and said, look, can you just help us walk through this process, because we don't know much about it. We know that we need to organise ourselves in a different way, but we want to do it efficiently. So, so I was all right through lockdown. I was lucky, actually. I was really lucky. And for the best part of 2 years, actually, because our spend went down, as everybody's probably did, because they weren't out and about all the time. Or at least I think that's probably what happened.
But I think even with deliveries and stuff, because the roads were so clear, like everything would be hitting on time.
Indeed.
And like
it just became a different way of delivering. And so actually it worked all right for us, and from a business and a personal point of view. Listen,
you were lucky with supermarkets though, and like
very much
because
so. Very much so.
Because that's where they were like, right, well, we've got to keep all this open and running.
Well, interestingly, one of the categories that I am responsible for from a supply perspective is one that I used to buy for Morrison's, which is fireworks. Now, fireworks is a 3-day-a-year business, really, but you've got 362 days of logistics to sort out. And thankfully, because we were in 2 or 3 of the major supermarkets, we were able to continue trading that. And that was, at the time, the lion's share of my sort of income stream. So that was really, really lucky. You're right. So it didn't have an impact necessarily on me, a negative impact on me. Actually, coming out of COVID was probably a time where I was having more conversations with businesses, because they were transitioning back to normal retail and had spent 2 years doing it in a very different way. And we're like, well, how do we go back? Because we can't do it this way anymore. You know what I mean? So there was a bit of extra work that came out of the back of COVID. But yeah, it was do you know what? It was a horrible time for everybody. I have tried to, well, I have. It's like a black hole in my life, really.
It's really odd, because I've been speaking about it the whole time. So, and I didn't really get much while we were, I didn't really get that many interviews while we were locked down, which is a shame, but it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. My memories are now obviously affected by other people's memories that I've discussed with, and our own memories. And yeah, we have black holed it to a certain degree. And there's that, we remember, it was sunny and it was nice at the beginning, and then it got all tiresome. But it was also a nightmare at the beginning, because all the news and newspapers were just red maps everywhere.
Yes.
Non-stop. Everyone's like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. This is crazy. And it was for so long as well that it's just like, everything happened. And
everything changed. And we're only now realising some of those changes as well. So, for example, with the snow that we had a couple of weeks ago here, our son was off school because of it. And they went back to Teams lessons for one day, where they were online the whole time.
No snow day for you. You've got to be online now.
Yeah. But it was like being transported back to a really stressful time. And actually, we found it really difficult. and quite traumatic to have spent one day doing it again, because we were being reminded of this horrible, horrible period in our life. So I think people are still traumatized by it, but unless they find themselves in a similar situation, it may just stay there latently, and forever, really. So
it's going to be one of those things. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, and it was a couple of years back. It was 75 years since the partition of India, and I went to this thing, and they were talking about how they really wanted to capture, as much first-hand experience from the event and like how it had affected things and the spill out. But it was so, such a huge traumatic event that it's like people didn't speak about it or wouldn't speak about it. It's one of those things of like, no. But, it's that thing of like, we need this information. It's really vital to us.
Yeah.
But the thing that happens when you go through something is that you're like, I don't want to talk about that, really.
Absolutely. It was a trauma for many, many people. And you know what? It's very easy for us, and we quickly forget how many people are no longer with us as a result of it as well, and how many people are still dealing with the fallout of that. If I look at it just from a business point of view, obviously there was a huge transition to online. And actually, I suppose one of the positives would be that the nation were forced to learn how to shop online. Whatever age and stage you are at life, you were forced to learn how to shop online. I think that was a good information transfer for people. However, it's interesting how at the heart of it, people still want to go to a shop and shop for stuff. And so we're seeing this, we've seen the peak of online, and it's dipped away. It's still really important, but people still want to go and shop. However, we still see all these empty premises on the high street.
Yeah. But it's the people that they want.
Yes.
Is that because you can do these boutique shops and stuff, and it's experience. You want a destination, you want a nice environment. Well, there's so many things, isn't there? But ultimately, like you say, it's the people buying from people and people wanting to interact with other people. That's the...
Completely. I think that the interesting thing for me recently has been I did a piece of work for a local hospice who have got 27 retail outlets in the local area, St Gemma's. And it was fascinating because here is a business that don't buy anything. Yeah. Their sole purpose is to raise money for a really important cause, but they don't buy anything. Everything that comes in could be a bag of anything, a box of anything. So from a data perspective, it was really interesting to see whether there were still trends to be found in that operation compared to all the knowledge and history that I've had before, and what people's shopping habits were, and how charity retail is viewed compared to normal retail. So that's been quite an interesting sort of experiment and insight into an area which has equally been affected by the last few years. Actually, it's not dissimilar.
It's the same.
It's just really
similar things.
How similar it is. And so I think it's just interesting what's going to happen over time, how these huge events have, shaped A, retail, B, us as human beings, and see how the country develops in the next 5 to 10 years. Again, I think we're still struggling.
Yeah, it's... when everyone was saying, we live in interesting times sort of thing. And then there was the other school of thought of like, can we just go back to boring, please?
Yes. Well, yes. But then you look at the politics of the country, and that's kind of where we've all gone, we won't talk politics, but I know the next big event that happened post-COVID was obviously, or throughout COVID, was the Brexit side of it. So, these massive shocks to the system, although some people wouldn't say that they were shocks, or at least Brexit wasn't a shock. Deluded is a word I would certainly use, but It takes time for these things to kind of, these big bumps in the road to iron out, and you work out how to navigate them again.
That's it. I mean, it's it has to go through the wave. I mean, it's like going back to COVID. We'll bob back onto Brexit in a second.
Yeah.
But COVID was very much like the tsunami experience of like, oh, look at all that water receding there. Where's all that going? And then like, oh, that's a really big wave, isn't it? Oh, it's coming towards me. And it was that, oh, there's this thing that's making lots of noise. Oh, it's happening there. Oh, it's happening. It's next door now. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yes. I think it probably showed how connected we have been and how important that is to all of us. You know, no matter how wonderful the internet and our ability to communicate long distances instantaneously is a wonderful thing. That community spirit, that connection, you know, you could argue that COVID brought communities together because they had to be at home, but actually it didn't. It was completely the opposite, because we couldn't speak to each other, or we couldn't interact with each other for long periods of time. And I think there's a huge psychological impact, and we're even seeing it now, aren't we, with the news saying, you know, businesses are desperately trying to get people back into their buildings to come and work in the offices. But I can't see that happening anymore. And I understand that there are financial implications for organisations that own property and that were using it before. But the fact is that some businesses productivity-wise will have had no impact at all.
Yeah.
Some people just cannot cope with noisy environments or, you know, spaces with lots of people in anymore. We've become used to different ways of working. So I still think this is going to play itself out over the next few years still. And I don't know. I think there'll be more people sitting at home in 10 years' time than there are now.
But it's got a bit of that business book element to it, hasn't it? Within the media, just that everyone wants to call it. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, "Oh, well, it's going to be like this, or it's going to be like that." And I think you're actually spot on with it. We don't know. Like, it's going to take ages for these things to shake out and like actually see what those impacts then are. I mean, it's 5 years since lockdown. This is going to be the first year that the first kids from lockdown are going into schools. What's that going to be like? What are those teachers going to notice in those children? How are they going to be different? Correct. Are they going to be different? We don't know.
We don't know, but my wife's a teacher, so
you will find out.
I will find out. Yeah, I will. It'll be interesting to see what those challenges are. We'll see.
So we'll do Brexit. I don't think we'll need to spend ages on this, but as you mentioned, it was around about the same time.
Yeah.
Has there been any change for you? Has it changed? Not necessarily how you work, but maybe what you work on, or has it just not made a difference really?
So I suppose it has made some difference in terms of what I need to be aware of when working with other businesses, because their challenges have changed. And so actually, in a way, some of what I do has been even more valuable to organisations, because they have increased costs and their lead times have extended. And so, trying to find solutions for them to mitigate some of the time issues, some of the cost issues has been quite interesting. I think, look, my view at the time was, why would you turn your back on the single biggest market that's literally on your doorstep because you think there might be something better out there? And I can't see any benefit to it at all from a business perspective, just simply none. And all it's done is cost us even more money, not in terms of necessarily just the trading aspect, but as a country, we have to and have had to spend more on having our own legislation or our own rules and, coming up with our own way of doing things, because we weren't able to go back to what we had before because we didn't have that at this time before. It just all seemed nonsensical. Anybody with any common sense should have been able to see that. However, we have to deal with what's in front of us. And we are all feeling the pain of it and have done for at least the last 2.5 years and will continue to do so because all our bills went up and all our food bills have gone up and they will continue to go up. And as a result, we've had to have our wages go up. But what you can't have is wages going up so much that it just keeps pushing inflation back up again. So, all these forces from this particular event have actually literally made us all poorer. So how do businesses react? Well, if you go around and look at supermarkets now, you'll notice that they have less choice. They are trying to force you into buying fewer items because they can negotiate harder on fewer items, therefore that they can make more margin, etc. And that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but that's what's happening. And so, that's something that's still having a massive, massive effect. But again, it didn't really affect my specific business. Not really.
Has it? It's not necessarily created more demand for you either, though. In terms
of
we need more people on this, or no?
No, and my thought at the time was, well, actually, there could be some opportunity, to help people more. But the nature of what they have to deal with is less money and more cost. So actually, spending more money on having somebody come and help them is a really difficult thing to manage. And actually, it's been harder to get over the line with some business owners because they want to see the benefit before they pay for it. I understand that, but then it's also naive, in my opinion, to ignore the opportunity to have an external person with experience understand and analyse what's going on in your organisation to see whether it matches with, what you're being told. As I said it earlier, the amount of times I've done, and I've offered, give me some data, give me 6 months of data, let me have a play with it, I'll come back to you and I'll tell you what's going on in your business and let's have a chat about it. And that's kind of what I would say to certain people if I felt that there was opportunity. I don't mind doing that at all. I find it quite exciting and fun to dig into people's organisations and data. But getting them to agree to even do that has been quite challenging. Because also they're afraid of what they might find. And it's really difficult to admit that your business that you set up, that you created, that every aspect of it is your baby, it's your child. It's difficult to admit that it's failing or that it's struggling. And so the brave ones say, yeah, let's do it. Other brave ones say, can I speak to somebody who you've done it with before so that I can feel confident that you'll help us? I'm like, absolutely fine. And then others say, look, I'm just really not ready for this yet. So yeah, and there are lots of different ways to pull expertise in to help any business and organisation. In fact, I remember about 8 years ago, I read an article in the Times business section that said that over the next decade and beyond, organisations, even large organisations, are going to start using external consultants with the expertise, bring them in for a short period of time to learn from them, and then spread some of that expertise, and then say thank you very much and move on to the next one. Rather than employing people to learn how to do all the stuff that they'd like them to know how to do from the people that were doing it already, because actually we're all commodities now, aren't we? And the churn in organisations is so high that, well, there's always some pressure to bring somebody else in because you can't afford the person who actually has all the information anymore.
There is, but how long can you do that for? Like, where are the skills and knowledge and experience going to come from at a point? Because you've got this sort of weakened resilience pool, again, thinking back to sort of COVID.
Short-termism, Simon.
Yeah, and it's like we have to learn from that experience of there was no slack in the system, so we need to build in some slack. There needs to be, it's fine to run a big international business on these like really strict margins and being really flexible, but at the same time, they also have a big amount of institutional skills, knowledge, infrastructure that they do lock in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you keep that base without that being eroded? Can it be free and loose and around and floating, or does it need to be locked down? Do you need a core thing there to make sure that it lives and it keeps breathing? I think that's one of the kind of difficult areas that we're going to negotiate.
I think you're right. I remember when I joined Morrison's, there was a gentleman there who'd been in the same category for about 20 years, coming up to retirement. I was thrilled to have him there because he had all this knowledge, all these relationships, this historical information, the anecdotes, the conversations, the who's, the what's, all of that stuff, which would have taken me years to learn, that I could glean from him and work with him for a year to then say, thank you very much, goodbye, but I'm now able to run at 100 miles an hour. And so it's always interesting for the businesses that I've worked in, particularly the supermarkets. They have this tendency to like to move people around quite a bit. They don't want people to get stale. It helps keep the suppliers on the toes as well, because you don't want to you want to be able to maintain your advantage, etc. So having somebody new come in means that the conversation starts again and somebody has a different view of it, etc. And whilst that's a tactic, I have always felt that, I suppose as long as you've got the right people and they're trustworthy, that having that long-term relationship with all that industry knowledge that can help you navigate your way through working together with your supply base when times are good and when times are bad, bring more stability to your organization than changing every 5 minutes. It's like, I always say to people, I'm going to give you two options. You can either earn 3% every year, you'll grow 3% every year for the next 20 years, or I can put 25% on your business this year, but you certainly won't get growth the following year. You may struggle to get to the same level, but then the following year I might be able to get you back up again. But then the year after that it might fall. I mean, who wants that? It's the let's get back to boring again, isn't it? It's like you want reliability, you want consistency. It's why subscription models work. In some respects, if you can hit the perfect number of people to pay an amount every month for your business to keep you sustainable, well, you only need to maintain that forever to be sustainable. And then add a 50 pence, and that's 1 million people giving you an extra 50 pence. It's like, my God, how easy is it to make money? Because you're so sucked into the whole need of having to have the subscription that, well, you're reluctant to get rid of it, aren't you? How many people in this country can honestly look at their bank statements and say that the direct debits they have are all ones that they need and or use on a regular basis? It's incredible how much money we idly spend. How many people have got a gym membership that they thought, oh, you know what, I might go back next month. I've done it, but then actually you could save yourself 25 quid a month, right? Which is 300 quid a year. Well, you have to earn 400 quid a year to get 300 quid a year. So actually, you could give yourself a pay rise if you want. So I just thinking about data differently, look at your own life, what you're doing, make some different choices. It all sounds perfect, but we are all in this vicious circle of just giving the same people lots and lots of money all the time.
And sometimes it seems like the choices are this, full belt, doing everything everywhere, or sitting at home, strumming on a ukulele, with nothing still.
Yeah.
What are these? The two? There's only two speeds. That
Absolutely,
or that.
absolutely. It's either fast or faster than you think you can go, or it's okay. I'm just going to completely stop now. That is how it is.
So let's do climate change. Get that
Okay.
out of the way, because I think we'll spend more time on social media.
Yeah.
So from a climate change perspective, well, from a work perspective and climate change perspective, does it come up? Is it something that affects your work? Are you aware of it? Are you conscious within your work? Like, do you use it to sell, or how do you feel about it? How does it interact with your work?
So I think I have to have an awareness of it, because even before I set up on my own, as a buyer, you have to be really, really conscious of where you're buying from, who you're buying from, their credentials, and the environment falls right into that category of assessment. So you have to be really mindful when you're working with organizations, whether that's something that's on their agenda and part of their strategy, if that's how important is it within their organization? Is it something that they actually hang their hat on? Because a lot of businesses use that now. And so it's important to be aware of it, understand it, and make sure that you recognize the importance to organizations in that sense. For me personally, I work from home. There are ways in which I can reduce my carbon footprint, which we do. And, that's a personal every week. How do we recycle, all that kind of stuff. From my business perspective, I'm literally a laptop, a phone, and here I am sitting at a table, which it could be a table anywhere. I suppose in a way, I just realised this. I don't drive to work every day. I do a lot more walking. We have the dog. And therefore, because I'm just me working for myself, my carbon footprint's reduced dramatically as a result of doing that. That's just a byproduct of it. However, I suppose it's we have to think about it all the time, though, and it has to be on the agenda all the time. But definitely working with clients, I need to know what their what their credentials are when it comes to that aspect of how we treat people in the world, basically.
Yeah. Oh, and if you're buying millions and millions of nuts, you're going to have to know what's happening in California.
Well, it's true. I mean, I remember the first time I went to China, I remember being really aware of my responsibility when I went out there, not just to the company and how they want to be perceived, but also from a buying perspective as an individual. How do I want to be perceived by the people who we're buying from and any other future organizations that I might work with or for? And so actually it was really interesting. Me and my technical manager, we spent in 3 years in Morrison's, we probably went to the Far East about 7 or 8 times to do various buying trips, etc. And I remember we'd always go into a factory and our strategy would be exactly the same. And we'd invariably know the owner of the factory, but that was about it. He'd go and look at the production line and make sure that everything was fine. And whilst he was distracting the business owner on the production line, I would literally just go walk off and have a mooch around the factory and go to all the places that I probably wouldn't have been shown, just to see what it was like, to see whether it was clean, whether there were facilities for the staff, what state were they in, making sure that they didn't have rooms with stuff piled, you know what I mean? And there were rats running around in the basement, etc. Because reputation's really important. And you want to know that you're buying from people who have a good reputation, but also care about the people that work for them. So that was always really important for me, always one of the most important things. We wouldn't work with, but I do remember going into one factory and being a bit shocked at some of the state of certain areas of it. And actually, as a result, our report back did get them to make some changes, which was good. But, you know, how many other factories are, squalid conditions, open 24 hours, people doing 12, 15-hour shifts, etc. It's you just don't know.
Yeah. Let's do socials then.
Yes.
So social media, obviously you're doing this. You've been on Leeds Business Podcast, so you do your fair share of podcasts.
A little bit.
Do you do much social media work? Are you on the socials a lot? What I want to find out here is not just do you know how to use it, but I'm kind of surveying. Do you find value in it? Do you get what you want out of it? Is it a useful part of your work, or is it like a task that you have to do that you kind of, I've got to feed the algorithm?
It's I never know how to feel about this kind of question, or even my response, actually. But I suppose I'll give you an honest answer. So when I first set up, my pal said to me, Simon, come with me. I'll take you to some networking groups. We'll have a good look around and see what's what. You can start just getting back out there and practicing your spiel and all that sort of stuff. And I said, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Amazing. And I did. And I spent probably 3 to 6 months going to different networking breakfasts and groups and seeing people, meeting people. And I know this isn't specifically about social media, but it does lead into it. And after a while, I thought, this isn't the best use of my time, because I'm talking to people who really just want to talk about themselves and their agenda. I'm also trying to explain to people what I do, but that isn't a soundbite kind of conversation. Therefore, it just, and I don't mind walking in a room with completely random strangers and having a chat, getting to know people. Don't have a problem with it at all. But I just thought, this is just not sitting right with me. I don't feel like it's beneficial. So I was very specific in the occasional event that I went to. And I kind of have taken the same approach from a social media perspective. So the amount of times I get two things. People say to me, so you're in marketing then? And I go, well, I'm not in marketing, but that is a part of an output of what I can help you do. In fact, Phil Fraser said to me, you need a website. This was only about a year ago, so you do need, just even if it's a single page so that you've got somewhere to point people. And so many times people have said that to me, and I just think, why? Like, why? Because I've got a LinkedIn.
What are they going to do when they get there?
Well, exactly. Like, I have a LinkedIn page, okay? If people want to know about my history from a work perspective and possibly some of the things that I've done in the last 10 years, it's all there. Okay, everything I would want somebody to know is there. Everything else, I'd like to talk to them. I don't want them to look at a page with a picture of me with a nice smile and, all that sort of stuff, because it's actually meaningless. It is meaningless. And how quick do we do that on a screen? We literally flick by. So I think the other thing with social media for me has been that whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, it's not always the best tool for what you're trying to achieve. It's a touch point. It's a good way to make a connection, to then have a conversation. The number of times on a weekly basis I get a LinkedIn connection request, and I'm like, who are you? What do you do? Why do you want to connect? And actually, look, I've used LinkedIn as a research tool as well, where, it's like, okay, how do I connect with people that are either in organizations that I'd like to target, etc. Well, I'll look on LinkedIn and I'll find out if I've got a first connection or a second connection. If my second connection is somebody who might be able to introduce me, then fantastic. But invariably, in fact, 99% of the time, nobody actually knows who the hell they've got or who they're connected with on LinkedIn. Oh, I don't know that person. Oh, I don't know. Because they just bloody click yes. So, don't get me wrong, it's a good tool, but it's not something that I have used on a regular basis. Now, more recently, it's really clear that people are seeing and hearing at the same time. And that and I talk to businesses about campaigns of marketing themselves and stuff. And using social media to encourage people to come into their shops, etc. And that's how I apply the use of social media for clients or prospective clients. And I will always say use those tools properly and effectively, because I know one business that I did a little bit of work for, they had 150,000 followers on Instagram. It was a £300,000 business. It was like, goodness me, that's incredible. That's a sustainable business for one person. If they just kept doing that for the rest of their life and they made some money out of it, fantastic. Now they must be £1 million business. They have to be. If they're not, then they've done something wrong. But that's the power of social media done in the right way. But where did that start? It started with the product. And then it became the brand. And then it became the feeling of being part of it. So people seeing a page with my stuff on and a testimonial here and there is an immediate touch point that disappears in a heartbeat, and it's meaningless. And actually, if somebody was really motivated to get in touch with me because they wanted to use my services or have a chat about what I do, they'd get in touch. They just would.
Yeah, and there's a level at which, I'm speaking to your buyer's head here, but if you're thinking of it from that perspective of because you're thinking about your budget and what your budget is going to do.
Yeah.
So there are people who are going to be like, well, I'm going to be spending, there's one person who's, I'm spending 20 grand on this. I'm going to look online to do that spend, and I'll do a bit of research around them or whatever. And there'll be another person who's like, I'm going to spend 20 grand on this, but I need to meet a person, and it needs to be real, and it needs to be something that's verified and that I can totally trust. Because it's ultimately about trust, isn't it? It's can I trust this product that I'm buying?
Correct.
So you're working very much in that arena of, come and speak to me, I'm a real person.
Yeah.
Which I think as well, that's the right place for you to be, because again, it's everyone doing the same thing. And it's well, I don't have to do the same thing as everyone else.
No.
There's still a market here for...
And you know what? When I first set up, I said to my wife, look, there are 365 days in the year. Take out weekends. That leaves me with 265 days. Yeah. Let's have 3 weeks holiday. That's 21 days. So there's about 250 days in the year where I could be working. Well, if I do one thing on any one of those 250 days that might open up a conversation or give me a lead on something or something that might generate work in some way, shape or form, and it doesn't have to be something complicated, I only need 3 or 4 hits a year for it to become worthwhile. So I think I'm doing enough every year to try and generate new business whilst doing what I do. The other thing is after a very short period of time. So I started out after the whole networking thing, looking for individuals who were well connected. So people who knew a lot of people and said, right, and got in touch with them on LinkedIn and said, I just set up, I am new to the whole business world in this sense. However, I've got all this experience, but I'd really love to talk to you about how you started, what you're doing now. Do you know what I mean? And use that as my starter for 10 conversation. And I ended up speaking to 8 or 10 business owners and networkers and people who just knew a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then when you add that to the wealth that you already have from the experience that you've got meeting people over the years, actually 95% of the work that I have done in 10 years has simply been because I either have worked with or know the people historically or have had a recommendation from people that I've worked with before or working for people who have pointed me in a direction because they know somebody else that might need some help.
Yeah. But that all comes with what's the word I'm looking for? But it's a recommend. Yeah, it's completely. A recommend, and it's a trustworthy recommend. It's completely. Verified.
It's like my own little trust pilot. At the end of the day, you always know when something's not going to go somewhere before a conversation happens. but you still got to knock on the door. And I know that because you just never know what might happen, you know.
Well, you might not be right for that job, but you might be perfect for the next job.
Correct.
And it's like, even if you think it's going to be a waste of time, like, what, you get no benefit from burning bridges, do you?
Never.
Of going in there like, I'm not going to do that. And
that comes back to what I was saying before, which is about business integrity and your reputation. If you are consistent and you are successful but consistent in what you do, in your approach, how you are with people, and you are someone who is respected as an individual, then you're more likely to pop up on the top of their list of people that you might recommend. And so it's a combination of experience and success with reputation and the kind of person that you are. And so it's trust and honesty for me. Trust and honesty, and those are really, really important factors in every relationship I've had since I left the corporate world, really.
Do we want to say anything more on social? I haven't got any particular questions for you in this regard at the moment.
No, I think, listen, I understand the power of social media. I understand that how it can really make a difference to organisations particularly. And if you're selling something, and yes, I am selling something, but if you're selling something that people want, you know, that lots of people want, then using social media is an incredibly effective tool, and I would always tell people to use it in conjunction with what's happening within their store or their online presence. It's a no-brainer. For me personally, for the work that I do, it requires a personal connection. It requires a little bit of time with somebody. And so I would always say, can we meet? Can we have a conversation? Go and talk to so-and-so. He'll tell you what I've done in the past and, you know, whether it's worth having a chat. Because that's just more valuable, and it saves me £1,500 on a website, or, you know, I just don't need it.
Yeah, well, like you say, what's the point of having an expense you don't need? Yeah. You know, you could be spending that money on yourself.
But it's not a rejection of it.
No, but...
it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's not needed. It's a nice to have, but really, is it nice to have? It's just more work for you.
Exactly.
So yeah,
exactly.
So change question next. This can be a difficult question when you own your own business, because it's kind of like, well, I've kind of done it, but also it can be a really interesting one as well, because there's always stuff that you want to change, and you know, it's never ideally perfect, is it? There's always room for improvement. No. So if you could change any 3 things about your work, what would you change?
So it is the hardest question. It is the hardest question. Because actually, the things that you would change matter to you specifically rather than anything else. I think I'd flip the question a little bit, because whilst the thing I might change is getting more people to get over the line and say yes to work with me, actually, is it, what do I need to change in order for that to happen? Is there anything I would change in order for that to happen? I suppose...
That's a really good spin. You're the first person that's done that as well.
Okay, because that's you know, it's the assessment thing, isn't it, again? So... I want more people. I wish I had a crystal ball that would show me the people that are going to say yes and the people that are going to say not interested. Let's not waste your time. The approach is all right. The approach that I take is okay. I think I would change my patter a little bit, my spiel, what I say. That's the thing I always get really bored of, actually, because it's like, how do I say what I do in 30 seconds? You know, if you go to a BNI meeting, you've got like 5 seconds to say who you are and what you do. And
tell me what your solution is in a sentence.
Exactly.
Go.
You know, actually, you know what? It reminds me, I worked in Morrison's for a category manager, and she was amazing. And I remember one day going up to her with a report that she'd asked for. And she just said to me, Simon, look, do me a favour. from now on, I want you to do everything on one page. I don't want you to do it on any more than one page. And I was like, right, okay. And she said, so there's no doubt that what's here is fantastic. Go and do it on one page, please. And I understood why she was asking the question, because she can't go into.
I haven't got time to read all that.
Not at all. Exactly. But for me, it was an exercise in recognizing that, do you know what? I do sometimes use 100 words where 5 might actually suffice. So I did. I went away and I did it on one page. And then from that point onwards, anything and everything that I try to do is on one page. That's why they call them one-pagers. So I would say being more succinct and articulate in how I put myself across would be something I would change. But that's difficult to do when you're 53 and you've been doing it for a long time. And
I don't know, Simon. You're pretty articulate.
It's maybe it's just because I'm constantly thining about it and always trying to be that way.
Yeah, but you've got that good thing where because I'm chaos.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, I am, but you honestly spend more time with me. But I would love to be able to have that, to speak at the calmer pace and just be because I find that I'm often, when I speak to people, I feel like I'm trying to keep their attention,
right?
Because whereas the way you've been speaking to me, I'm like, I'm listening to you because you're obviously saying something important that you've taken the time to say.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so.
But I would love that demeanor. I'd love to be able to just go, I've got time to tell this, instead of going, you have to listen to me now.
Do you know what? I think having stepped out of the corporate world is probably what changed it for me, because I was like that. I was like, you want somebody to listen to you all the time, because it is about you, and you are a bit of an ego, and you do want to be the focus of the attention. But actually, I realised I don't have time for that. I'm also I get bored of my own voice.
Yeah. And
so sound bites are great, but you also have to explain. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to everything, isn't there? You tell somebody how you're going to do something, and what you're going to achieve. Then you go when you do it, and then you come back and you tell them what you've done, and they go, oh, right, yeah. Well, you did say that in the beginning, didn't you? So really, it's just repeating yourself, but in a progressive way, so that you get to where you want to get to. And I don't know, I get really frustrated with some business owners who I do work with who just don't see that what they're doing is either damaging or it's detrimental, or not doing something is doing the opposite of what they want to have happen. And they think they know better than you. And I think I used to care what people thought as well. I don't really care very much now. And what I've realised is, actually, this is an assertive statement about me. Actually, a lot of the time, what I say and advise, it's usually right. And it's usually based on evidence that I can say, well, that's proof that it would work that way. Okay, I had a meeting with a client fairly recently who 18 months ago I said, if you keep doing what you're doing, this is what's going to happen. 18 months down the line, hello. And now I don't like using the phrase, I told you so, but it doesn't come from anything other than years of experience. And
I haven't got psychic powers.
I'm like, So, I do get frustrated sometimes, but I would like to be a little bit more succinct in how I put things across. I'd like to worry less about that as well, actually. But again, that's just me. That's just how I am. And I think the only other thing I would definitely change is being braver just being braver in saying what I'm really thinking.
Yeah.
Because it is a considered thought, and it's not arrogance. It's what I see and believe, and therefore that's okay to stand in that space and be that confident, because I've seen so many other business owners literally without a care in the world or a care for anybody say whatever they like. I mean, we're seeing examples of it now in the world around us, and getting the result that they want for good or bad, but getting their result. I think I probably would just, even now, still at the age of 53, I need to be a bit braver. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that thing of it's not about you. This business isn't about you. No business is about you. The business is about the business, and that business is data, and it's policies, and it's people, and it's buildings, and it's products, ideally, a goods or a service or something.
Exactly.
There. Yeah.
I hate that question. I don't mind answering it, but I don't like it. It's the classic mirror question, isn't it? Right, look at yourself and go, what are the things that you could do better? That's not my job. My job is to tell you how you can do things better. Anyway.
So the final question is the UBI question. I think it'd be really interesting to hear your answer on this. So are you familiar with the UBI at all? Have you come across it before? So, Universal Basic Income?
Until you put the question on a piece of paper to me, I hadn't actually. Okay. But I have had a very superficial look at what the concept of UBI is. It's a very interesting altruistic approach to trying to level the playing field a little bit, or at least try and give people some comfort and support. It's such an emotive thing. I don't know what your expectation is from people when they answer the question of,
It's really interesting. It's really interesting to see how people react to that.
Yeah. So I am always keen, and over the years, having trained buyers and merchandisers in the business world and stuff, for me, I'm interested in fairness and making sure that people are given a chance, whether that's at work, in life. I think everybody finds themselves where they are for a reason. Those are either simple or complicated, and sometimes incredibly difficult to unpick, and most people aren't prepared to look in the mirror and even try and go down that route. So the idea of everybody having a safety net is how I sort of see it. I can understand why it might have a positive impact generally. If I was to suddenly become a capitalist, I would say, but if you give people money, then they won't go out and earn themselves some money, and therefore they might not be interested in getting a job and this, that, and the other. But that's not what I think this is about. This is about just having everyone having enough to survive, really.
They say it as a floor on payments rather than a ceiling.
Yeah.
So people either think of it as they think that, everything's going to be paid for, which means I'm not allowed to do anything and sit on my backside. And it's like, no, you can still work and earn and so on.
Absolutely. And actually, in a way, if it was ever something that was brought into place, there would have to be really strict rules about it. You'd have to have ceilings, and you'd have to have conditions attached to it. And I think that they would have to be thought through really, really carefully. I suppose on the flip side, if everybody had access to a UBI, what would happen to charity and charities? Would they still have a place? Would they be required? Would that still be something that, from a humanity perspective, is, because why do we give to charity, or why do people give to charity? We give to charity because there are people in need for whatever reason.
But why don't we give it to the people in need?
Well, but this is the thing.
I know what you mean.
Don't know, but do you know what I mean? It, in a way, it's born out of suffering for people or things or organisations or whatever. And so I think it kind of taps into the whole, are you a compassionate person? Are you a selfish person? You know, how do you view yourself? How do you view the world? Do you look in? Do you look out? I suppose as a system offering something like UBI, if I was to sidestep it a little bit, for me, it's encompassed by something that I think if every individual in the world just had this, then we wouldn't need to have a conversation about something like UBI, and that is just kindness and kindness for others. Because if it was as easy as everybody being able to be that way with each other, brilliant. You know, it's a pertinent subject this week, isn't it? Kindness and tolerance, and you know, who needs a UBI if everybody's just being nice to each other?
Well, poor people.
No, but this is the thing.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
do you know
helping.
what I mean? And you know, what I'm saying is, as perfect world, as the concept of trying to give everybody something so that there's a baseline level. Listen, there's enough money in the world for everybody to be happy and fed and warm and comfortable, okay? Yeah. It's just unfortunate that as a world we choose, or some people choose, to ignore the fact that that's a possibility. Because we're all constantly trying to make money out of trying to feed people or keep people warm or retaining this fossil fuel for our own use, etc. So in a way, everybody's just trying to survive.
It's a competitive advantage too. But like you say, you know, we're all trying to survive in a system that can provide for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's a weird one. For yourself, obviously in your position, you've done the numbers on your work. If you had a universal basic income coming in, that's just, you're not going to depend on it. You're not going to use it to do less work. I don't think it would impact you.
It definitely wouldn't. And
in a direct way.
It's funny, you know, everybody has these kinds of conversations on what would you do if you had £1 million or if you were a millionaire, etc.
It's kind of that question.
It is, in a way. It is. And whilst one can't definitively answer the question because one has never been in that position, I'd like to think that actually I do have enough money. I do have enough money because me and my wife and my son live in a really nice house.
You're meeting your needs.
We're meeting our needs.
You've got more.
We're fed, we're warm, we're clothed. We don't have to go and have a holiday every year. You know, those things are luxuries. I don't need any more, okay? Because actually stepping out of the corporate world, my income went down. I couldn't. I set up a limited company. There are ways in which actually it went up. But that was called good money management, actually. And actually I'm less stressed as a result of it. And actually, in fact, the single most important thing that I have had in my life, having left the corporate world, is spending time with my son, who, if we'd have had him 20 years ago, I would have missed the first 10 years of his life. And so you can't buy that, and you cannot go back and claim that at all. So actually, thank you to all the businesses that I've worked for before, for all the experience I have. Thank you to Morrison's for giving me voluntary redundancy, which allowed me to then have some money to see if I could set up on my own. And here I am in my 10th year, and I've never looked back, and I'm definitely happier, I'm healthier, and richer in life because of it. And the most important things for me are I've been able to enjoy them because of all that came before. That's it, really. So UBI, I understand the concept. It's... Yeah, I don't know. I just think it should be something that everybody should have a basic right to anyway, which is to be warm and fed and, you know,
Well, this is it. I don't think that there's absolutely no excuse that homelessness in this country should just not be acceptable. Should just not. And I know there are plenty of non-financial complications, etc., and complicated cases, but they should be kept to an absolute minimum. It should just not be happening. Like, if there is anything in this progress thing, if we're supposed to be getting better year on year, by 2025 we should have nailed this. If we're supposed to be civilized.
If you were to look over history, and let's look at the history as data, and look at how humanity has ebbed and flowed, and how things have changed over the centuries. Actually, whilst time has moved forward, I don't think we have moved forward very far at all, because we just keep going backwards.
It's just a story. It's a story to sell stuff.
It's the classic, if you change nothing, nothing will change.
Yeah.
So actually, we just keep repeating the same stuff all the time. And actually
changing everything but our bad habits.
It's like, guys, come on. Let's just look at all the evidence. It says that, well, we've done this before, and look what happened last time. Well, why are we repeating the same thing again? Yeah. Honestly, I don't know.
It's the crazy pills thing, isn't it? Of like, are we all looking at the same thing here, or what are you all doing?
It's funny, isn't it? I having worked with a local hospice recently, I felt like I'd really peaked from a professional point of view, because here I was, able to impart all my knowledge and skills to an organisation whose shareholders were families who were losing their loved ones. And every single penny was really, really important in making sure that was done in the most sensitive possible way. And the people that work in that organisation are angels. And that was the first time I'd ever worked for an organisation that didn't put the profits into the pockets of the shareholders. Now, I'm not saying that you could say I'm on dangerous ground here, because, these are the people that pay my wages, some of them. But the fact is that if everybody's viewed being a shareholder in a different way, as in, it's not about demanding a return on my investment, in a financial way, but actually in a different way, so that I could do X, Y, and Z. Or if everybody that was a shareholder was honest enough to say, well, actually, this is what I'm now doing with my money, because I'm able to earn X, Y, and Z from this organisation, maybe people would see it in a different way as well, and that actually having a Sainsbury's, a Tesco, I don't know, whatever business it is actually still really important, because of the output that the profits then generate. It's just it's a small shift in mindset, but all the wealth over the last 25 years it's the pyramid, it's the triangle again.
Yeah,
all the wealth is going right to the top.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to.
Yeah. So where can people find... I'm going to do the wrap up there, because that was a really good out point. So, where can people find you? You don't have a website, but you do have a LinkedIn presence.
I do have a LinkedIn profile, so you can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that's...
Do you have an email, newsletter, any of that, or is it just...
I have an email address, a business email address, but again, that I suppose people would have to have a look at LinkedIn.
Yeah, get in touch with you on LinkedIn.
Or find some of my first connections on LinkedIn and look at the businesses I've worked with and speak to those people. But when you ask that question and I give the answer, I think, God, that's really lame. Nobody can actually really get in touch with me if they want to.
That's good. That, in a time where everyone's supposed to be available all the time, and you're creating some artificial scarcity there and generating demand.
I will remember that phrase and use it. Thank you.
So thank you very much for doing this. I will, I give people an opportunity to sort of discuss anything you want at the end. I don't feel like you've got any burning issue to say anything, but I'm going to give you the opportunity. If you want to do a plug or a shout out, anything at all, now's your chance. But if you don't have to say anything, if you don't want
I mean, listen, for me, if people want to listen to this and they want to hear about me and then they will. I don't need to do any shameless plug. But the strapline is the strapline. It is big ideas. It is simple solutions. Keeping it simple is what I try and do. But no, I think if I think back to everything I might have said in the last hour and a half, I wouldn't change a word of it because it's all true.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with that, can you?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you again to Simon for being my guest. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. You can find Simon at www.linkedin.com/in/Simon-Williams. If you're in retail and if you can find him, maybe you can hire Simon to unlock your business potential. And if you'd like to contact me about anything working hours related, then you can email me about the show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Remember, listener, no matter what you do, it's impossible for you to understand anything that your salary depends on you not understanding. So try to work for peace and try to plan with kindness. Raise your voice, but reduce your impact. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited, created and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Remember, Western Studios Leeds Limited when you're ready to start making your content in West Yorkshire. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook, facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds, and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Bookmark western-studios.com so you can see the latest prices and use my contact page to drop me a message about your own podcast project or working hours at any time from anywhere. Maybe you want or need a podcast host, co-host or narrator for your podcast project. Maybe you just need another voice for one or more episodes of your show. Podcasts are so much more than gossip, book promotions and marketing for online courses. Podcasts and other audio content get your online brand out there. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to have an audiobook or video course? Want to share your learning, knowledge and expertise in your field? Want to learn, teach or raise awareness of something general or particular? Want to improve internal comms with messages your staff might actually engage with? Or do you just want to brighten up the world with some entertaining content? Then make a podcast. If you're making your podcast within West Yorkshire, then think about making it with western-studios.com. Whatever your podcast questions or needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.